I am now pleased to introduce Camilla Reese. Camilla is a communications strategist and award-winning health and environmental activist. She is the founder of electromagnetichealth.org and Manhattan Neighbors for Safe Telecommunications. She is a senior policy advisor at the National Institute for Science, Law, and Public Policy. The title of Ms. Reese's talk is Facing Our Reality, Humanity at a Crossroads. Ms. Rees will explain the importance of people getting involved in and supporting activism by supporting public education, media understanding, and the legal recourse to assure a sustainable future. Welcome, Camilla.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Virginia. And greetings, everyone. It's really great to be here in Concord. For those of you who don't know me, I've been an activist on the subject of electromagnetic fields and also tech overuse and addiction for 12 years. And I speak to you today both from the perspective of somebody who has studied the science on the subject and the clinical ramifications for 12 years, but also as somebody who has been injured by electromagnetic fields. I deeply empathize with the people today who are hurting and on the periphery of society, unable to participate in the ways that we take for granted. People who can't take a job in a wireless environment, bright students who can't concentrate in schools using Wi-Fi or when they're doing their homework at home on a wireless connection, or people who can no longer socialize with friends like they used to because of the ever-present cell phones, Wi-Fi, and wireless infrastructure all around us, and people with chronic illnesses that never, ever recover because of this increasingly pervasive and little understood invisible stressor. I have a sense also of just how bad it's going to get for those who are already impacted by the present exposure levels. From the many millions more of these antennas if we allow the 4G and 5G antenna densification vision of the telecommunications industry to become reality. I'm talking about the debilitating symptoms that you've heard from the two prior speakers, things like impaired cognitive function, inability to focus, fatigue, sleep impairment, mood alterations, heart irregularities, anxiety and depression, and more. These are debilitating symptoms that an estimated 3 to 8% or 10 to 25 million people in the U.S. are already experiencing today in a serious way from Wi-Fi in our homes, neighborhoods, schools, offices. I'm also talking about the symptoms that over 100 million people, as one of the prior speakers mentioned, those who are mildly symptomatic, like people who might know that they get a headache from their cell phone. Mild, but usually worsening over time with time and with the addition of new sources of exposure. I have experienced many of these symptoms myself. I became debilitated 12 years ago when I was sleeping on the other side of the wall from a neighbor's wireless router. New neighbors moved in, they put the router on the other side of the wall from my pillow. And I was fortunate that I was able to figure it out when nobody really knew about this subject, and fortunately greatly recovered. It was a rude awakening to this issue because I had incorrectly assumed that if technologies were on the market, that someone had determined that they were safe. And it happened again more recently when a neighbor put in another location, put in 2 wireless routers. And I had to completely shield one side of my premises with industrial quality aluminum and cover it with linen fabric. Not pretty, but it did the job. With the help of Dr. Merritt, actually, I was able to get it down to almost 0 from the frequencies that were in my place. Of course, we've heard today from Dr. Merritt and Haru that they're not only are they the acute symptoms, but that there are serious chronic effects from this radiation, including cancers, neurological, metabolic, reproductive, and microbiological effects. The evidence is plentiful and it's undeniable at this point. And so today on this program, I am giving voice to the people who have been injured because of society's negligence, and to those who most certainly will become injured on the present trajectory of more and more antennas in our midst. Outside in neighborhoods, on buildings, in our skies, with the launch of, now the number is 50,000 satellites going up that will transmit wireless from space, as well as antennas inside from the no value added, wholly unnecessary, I call it surveillance electronics network in development known as the Internet of Things. Even former CIA Director James Woolsey called this a stupid, stupid thing and said we're going to be spied on by our dishwasher. Tom Wheeler, let's see if we can make this work, who was the former chair of the FCC. We'll just listen to him for a few minutes.
If something can be connected, it will be connected in the 5G world. Hundreds of billions of microchips connected in products from pill bottles to plant waters, requiring massive deployment of small cells. We won't wait for the standard. Now, to make this work, the 5G build-out is going to be very infrastructure intensive. We must reject the notion that the 5G future will be the sole province of urban areas. The 5G revolution will touch all corners, and that's damn important.
So understand that what is unfolding with antennas everywhere, in what is unfolding everywhere, the human beings are just going to be a piece of a very large computer system, a vision that is that fundamentally devalues human beings and that reflects what I would call a fantasy of some very imbalanced people who are creating these technologies just because they can, not because they're meeting a market need. Now, for those of you who have no symptoms and think you're not being affected, this was a study done by Dr. Beverly Rubik. The first image is after a 20-minute baseline period. This is the thermography test. Then the second one is measuring the effects on the brain after 5 minutes, and then after 10 minutes when the temperature degree went up 3.9 degrees, so that's almost 4 degrees. And then here are some study done on red blood cells. First one is the baseline. The second one is the second one is after being held, a cell phone in a bag, in a backpack, not actually used against the head, where you see the cells starting to clump together. And the third one is after actively using the cell phone against the head. The blood cells are getting sticking together, creating a dangerous picture. And then she looked at, well, where is this happening? Is it happening at the extremities? So she tested the blood from the fingertips and from the toes, and look at how bad it is there. So we all are being affected, and Carl talked a little bit, Dr. Merritt talked a little bit about the cell towers, but I want to just point out a couple other things. But this is a study from Belo, Horizonte, Brazil, that shows that there was a 35% increased death from cancer within 100 meters of a cell tower compared to those who lived over 1,000 meters. So here we're talking about putting in these antennas on utility poles, really steps from our bedroom. And it makes no sense. This is a good image from the movie Full Signal. If you haven't seen it, it's worth seeing. In Yusfi, Israel, where a doctor got concerned because there were so many increased incidences of cancer, he plotted them out by their address, and it turned out that all the with one or two exceptions, all of the incidences were in the vicinity of where the antennas had gone up. Carl talked about the kind of effects we're seeing. I'll point out also, this was a study I was involved in, effects on the heart. In this study, 40% of the subjects showed heart irregularities after exposure to, it was a portable phone, but same frequency as Wi-Fi. This particular one, the heart rate almost doubled. So we have to remember that this radiation is biologically active. It is not static. And it's comprised of pulsing and peaks and different signaling characteristics and new signaling characteristics that are coming with the 5G as well. And we forget this, or maybe we were never taught it, but we really need to start focusing on it today. And beyond the fact that we're electromagnetic, we should, our brain, our heart, every single cell in our body runs on electrons. But beyond that, as Dr. Merritt said, we're also water. 99% of the molecules in our body are water. And so don't you believe when you hear that 5G is only going to affect us at the surface of the skin. This is entirely false. This is propaganda that was put out early in the propaganda on 5G to make us think that there wasn't a problem. It's actually affecting the water in our bodies, creating incoherence, and with many downstream biological effects. And I can tell you that telecom industry insiders looking at the effects on water are gravely concerned about 5G. Dr. Haru talked about the effects on children. This is a summary of some of the effects from a program that we did in Connecticut a few years ago. We are affecting children's ability to function and to learn and to discern and have healthy relationships, and we're setting them up for a lifetime of health problems on the trajectory that we're on. We're also seeing an increase in psychiatric disorders in children, psychotropic medication use, chronic medical conditions, and disability filings. And this is no surprise to the people who understand the science. Okay, I'll mention this study from Saudi Arabia. They did a study, there was a cell tower, 2 schools, one tower stronger than the other tower. Showed that the risk for increased hemoglobin A1C and type 2 diabetes was significantly greater in the school that had the higher power tower. And this is something we really need to pay attention to given the epidemic of diabetes today. And of course then there are the mental health problems from the technology that we see all around us beyond just the biological. I think what's happening to the fabric of our society, we all see it. It's undeniable. And a big question is raised when we start to look at the amount of time that we actually spend online. Estimates are between 5 and some as high as 11 hours a day. So when you do the math, 5 hours a day times 365 days a year, that's 1,825 hours in the year. Now if you assume that you sleep for 8 hours and you have 15 waking hours, that translates to 122 days online per year, which is a little over 4 months of our life. So we have to start asking if this is the reality that we want. Are we wanting to spend a third of our life online? Do we want our closest relationship to be with a machine and to be habituated to a dopaminergic stimulant? Or our lives sped up so that we miss a lot of what could be? Do we even realize just what we are giving up by spending many months of our life online? A big reason for why there are as many antennas out there as there are is because we are asking for them through our purchases of wireless and mobile technologies. Here's an example of the insanity. This is in Russia. They're putting wireless virtual reality headgear on the cow to give the cow a prettier picture than the location of the farm. And it's actually serving to reduce anxiety in the cows, and they're hoping that it will yield more milk. Now, it was really moving to me when I learned about the death of Carsten Schroeder, who was the CEO of Swisscom. Several years ago, he committed suicide. And just weeks before he committed suicide, he was interviewed by 2 media organizations. And in Reuters, he said, he described himself as a victim of modern communications, always on the go, and said it was too easy to get lost in the stream of information. And he said, I find it increasingly difficult to unwind. Well, you know what? Sometimes, even though I greatly limit my technology use, I find myself getting lost in the stream of information and missing the life that I would otherwise have. So today, we are at a crossroads. We are either going to go down this destructive trajectory that is going to greatly harm large numbers of people, as well as our genetic material, or we're going to do some truth-telling and demand change. Dr. Martin Pall has said we are harming the 4 things that matter to us most: our health, our brain function, the integrity of our genome, and our ability to produce healthy offspring. We have to face our reality, the name of this talk. We have to stop and see it in the whole picture. See what is happening to us, to our environment, to our lives, and see if we are truly in agreement with this mad rush to a surveillance society that all these antennas are facilitating. Antennas are going up everywhere, on utility poles, street signs, lamp posts, municipal infrastructure. Electronics in our homes have embedded antennas in them for the Internet of Things. Pervasive antennas leading to a surveillance society and a rogue surveillance capitalism that is not based on meeting a market's need. We have antennas using more and more dangerous higher frequencies and more complex signaling characteristics on which there has been no safety testing. We are dramatically increasing energy usage to power all of these antennas and the data centers, when faster, safer, and more energy-efficient alternatives exist that you're going to hear about from Dr. Sheckley next. And we have technology becoming increasingly immersive with virtual reality, augmented reality, as well as invasive with implantable wireless technology and a long-term vision of the merging of man and machine. In addition, we're agreeing to the personal tech risks. We're agreeing to the programming that's designed to addict us. We know that. To the screen effects, like the lighting and the flicker and the effects on our eyes, that's well known. We're agreeing to being in an overstimulated state, to the immersive nature of these experiences and the blurring between reality and virtual reality. We're agreeing to the well-known multitasking and interactivity effects, risks related to the increasing speed of our lives due to tech, and risks simply to the duration of use, that the levels of that the 5 to 11 hours a day. So we're on a destructive antenna densification trajectory with a total lack of consciousness about the biological and health effects of radio frequency radiation and other technology risks. We're turning a blind eye to the loss of our privacy, to the environmental effects, to the uglification of America, to the energy utilization, to the effects on future generations, to the impacts of all of this on healthcare costs and the economy, and to the effects of radio frequency radiation on planetary communication systems by way of the water that Dr. Merritt described. It's programs like Today in Concord and this program that give me hope, if we can possibly play it. These were children in Ireland protesting recently. 6 counties in Ireland have banned 5G. So, as you've heard today, we have to face the reality that the U.S. government has known since at least the 1940s, if not earlier, that radio frequency radiation was dangerous, and yet has allowed a multi-trillion-dollar industry to emerge. They've allowed the FCC to use fraudulent safety guidelines that only protect against the heating effects, but yet they know that the radiation is linked to cancers, neurological problems, all kinds of problems. Our government knows this, and yet they have been providing cover to the telecom industry by allowing them to get away with these inadequate FCC guidelines. Actually, let me see if I can go back. So 49 years ago, in 1971, the Naval Medical Research Institute report showed effects. In 1981, NASA report. In 1993, an FDA internal memo showed that admitted that microwaves accelerate cancer. In 2002, an EPA letter affirms that the guidelines, FCC guidelines, are not protective. In 2011, an NIH and Department of Energy study showed cell phones affect the blood glucose metabolism in the brain. The Department of Interior has said that the guidelines are 30 years out of date and no longer applicable as they do not protect wildlife. And recently, we heard about the National Toxicology Program. So our FCC guidelines continue to be a fraud and offer the telcos protection from liability. We know the Harvard report Dr. Merritt mentioned that the RFCC is a captured agency, and this was from a report. You can find it online. They have the same playbook as the tobacco industry in all these different ways. And we also know that 11 international agreements are being violated by 5G, development of 5G. So, and in addition, we know that there's an alternative to all of this antenna densification. We publish a report, Reinventing Wires, The Future of Landlines and Networks, authored by Dr. Sheckley, who's with us today, explaining how we need to create advanced communication systems that are fast, that are secure, that are, in fact, it was argued in this report from 13 different angles, not only one of which is health, but from 13 different angles. Each one of these reasons on their own is enough to say we should be using hardwired communications. So as I close, I want to just play this one video. This is, if we can, hold on a minute. This is, okay, there we go. This is Dr. Magda Havas from Trent University in Canada. She's measured the frequencies coming off of life, off of a plant. In this case, it's an aloe vera plant, and synthesized it so that you can hear it. These are the frequencies from nature that we were born into. And this is the frequency of a cell phone, my cell phone. So we have a choice. We need to stop the denial, become active, engaged. There's an urgent need to recreate a world founded on our values of respect for life, for others, for the environment, that embodies the hope that we can grow into our potential as a species and not cave to the pressures to be merged with machines or shaped and controlled by computer algorithms and harmed by man-made technologies. We need to exercise our rights and protect our democracy. So in closing, I'm going to say please support the radio frequency radiation activism, get involved locally, financially support the activist groups, the policy groups, and the legal efforts if you're able. There's significant resources are needed to educate widely on the RFR risks, to change the FCC exposure guidelines, to reverse a section of the Telecom Act of '96 that prevents your local governments from resisting these antennas on health or environmental grounds. We need to repeal laws in 25 states that are enabling wireless proliferation. We need to expose a massive accounting fraud that turns out there's a $500 billion to $1 trillion possibly accounting fraud that has been discovered, whereby they can show that 5G would not be sustainable on its own. They've been playing with the numbers, shifting the expenses from 5G into the landline balance or income statement, and so it's not directly related to the health effects, but it deserves everyone's support if possible, because it is going to show how corrupt this industry is and possibly be a windfall for individual states who will be able to recoup their funding. So we've done many policy reports, including the last one, Reinventing Wires. Dr. Sheckley, who you're going to hear from next, has done a report that may be relevant to other states. This is on Colorado, but shows how do you reclaim local control over cellular wireless facilities. And finally, we're hoping to do 2 more reports and are looking for support for them. One is on sustainability in telecommunications, and one is on this massive accounting scandal that's called deregulators. So thank you very much for being here. If you're interested in the subject, get involved, support your local groups, and